Hi, my name is Aisling Ureda and today's talk is on stress and anxiety, and then also some techniques for how to manage stress and anxiety. To begin with, we're going to look at how stress is experienced in the body. So we will have a series of physical sensations as well as mental thoughts and emotions and feelings. So when we feel that we are under threat or in danger, our body reacts with the hormone adrenaline, and adrenaline will wash throughout the body. And as it goes through the body very, very quickly, within moments, the body will change and adapt to put our body in a situation where we can either fight an animal or some threat, or we can run away from it. So really, it ties back to the days when we lived in caves and we might have to fight big woolly mammoths or run away from big woolly mammoths. So this system has been developed to get us out of danger very quickly, and we're not supposed to really stay in it. We're just supposed to be in it for that short period of time. What's happening these days is that we are actually staying in a high level of adrenaline when we don't necessarily need to. So what happens in the body is, as adrenaline goes around the body, the pupils dilate so that we can take in our surroundings. We can become a little bit more hypervigilant. We can take more in our sight, which will prepare us for fight or flight. The lungs, the blood will go to the lungs and we will breathe more shallow. We'll get more oxygen into the body quicker. Our breathing will increase, go faster. Then we'll also get blood to the arms and legs. Instead of sending blood to the digestive organs to digest food, it will go to the arms and legs so that we're ready to run or to attack. So our body changes quite a bit when we have a lot of adrenaline going around it. And we need to the body is ready to be used to either run or to attack. So our body is in a certain physical situation. And then our mind is on high alert. We're thinking quickly. We're trying to get out of the situation. And emotionally, we might feel agitated, scared, anxious. We're ready for attack. So when we get into that state, really, we're supposed to have the scenario and then get away and then come back down. So we've got the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous system. So the sympathetic nervous system gets activated when we have adrenaline, when we have fight or flight. And then the parasympathetic nervous system is more relaxed. It's when everything tones back down. When the blood stops going to the arms and legs and it goes back to start digesting our food and to our other organs. When we don't need to breathe as quickly to get as much oxygen in. And our pupils can relax. We don't need to be hypervigilant about looking all around us. So the parasympathetic nervous state is the more relaxed, calmer, slowed down, easier state to be in other than the sympathetic. It's more calm. It's more resting. So when we do get into the fight or flight state, we then need to get back into the parasympathetic state afterwards. We need to relax. And what can happen is, in today's society, which we're finding for many of us is very stressful, we are going into the sympathetic state, we're going into an adrenaline state, we're going into fight or flight, and we might be staying there all day. We might be there in our work, we might be feeling this way in a traffic jam, sitting in a car, cooped up, really angry or really stressed, with adrenaline and the body ready to fight or to flight, but not able to do anything, just sitting there with it. So when we're looking at how our body experiences stress, we need to look at how to come out of the stress. We need to learn how to relax and calm down. Sometimes people find that exercise really helps in this case because exercise helps move the adrenaline. So we do that physical thing that our body is prepared for. And then afterwards, we can relax. Of course, when we exercise, we often get a byproduct of serotonin and dopamine, which are very relaxing or very nice feeling hormones. So doing something physical can be a helpful way of using up that adrenaline or mopping up that adrenaline that you have and feeling relaxed afterwards. Either way, whatever way you look at it, when you've got the stress situation or feeling in the body, you need to come back to a relaxed place after, that they need to be balanced out. People that stay in a high level of stress and anxiety all the time, stress or anxiety or both, that they will then find that they're high stress, and then they crash and their whole body is wrecked. And you could be wrecked for a day or 2 days, just exhausted, because you can't physically maintain these high levels of adrenaline and stress. So one of the most important things to be aware of when it comes to understanding stress and anxiety is to understand that hormonal regulation and that nervous system regulation between the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system. Another thing to think about with stress is how you perceive a situation affects how stressful it will be to you. So some people see stresses as more of a challenge. An example would be if two people were working together and their boss came and they had the exact same job, and the boss came and gave them both the exact same challenge. And well, maybe the boss came and gave them both an extra job, and one perceives it as a challenge and the other perceives it as a very scary thing that maybe they won't be able to do. So depending on how you're viewing situations in life, that will affect how you manage your stress. So some people turn that extra job into a challenge, into something exciting. They might use the adrenaline that they get from the bit of anxiety about this new job to get excited to do things. They might get really productive. They might contact lots of people. They might really try and figure out this complex new thing. Whereas the person who perceives it as a difficulty or an issue, or feels uncertain about it or not very confident about it, they might start to panic. They might not be able to focus on what they need to do, or to plan ahead, or to get support because they're panicking. They might start avoiding it. They might start thinking about it over and over again, but actually doing nothing. So how you are perceiving the stress makes a big difference. If you find that when a new thing happens in your life, or a new thing comes your way, and your way of stressing about it is to ruminate, to go around in circles, to not address the issue, then that is going to be more difficult, and you're going to get stuck in more and more adrenaline. And there's something about trying to learn how to see things more as a challenge, or in a more positive way. Not everything, but there is definitely a difference in how people manage stress based on how they perceive it, and whether they grab the bull by the horns, or whether they hide under the pillow and try to pretend it's not happening. I've noticed that people with high levels of stress will often do things that can sometimes either create more stress or keep the stress going. Things like, if you're very anxious, being drawn to watching a horror movie, or not breathing properly and not looking at or managing your breath. Putting yourself in situations where the anxiety builds more. Drinking loads of coffee, which for most people will make them feel more stressed, give them more adrenaline, increase their heart rate. Staying up too late, or using substances that help keep you in this stressed place. So sometimes people are in stress and then they continue to live in a way that creates more stress. So they keep it rolling. They don't get a break from it because they keep doing behaviours that continue the stress. In order to understand that a little bit more, we need to understand the patterns in our mind. So when we're young, we start to develop ways of interacting with the world based on the situations around us. So, for example, if you get given out to a lot when you're a child, you might start to give out to yourself in advance, predicting that you're going to get given out to. So it's a way of preparing yourself for what's going to happen next. And so you're putting yourself in a position where you know what's going to happen, you're prepared for what's going to happen, and you've predicted it. So that makes you feel a little bit safer, like you know what's going on. It's different for everybody what patterns they will have, but that can be a bit of a classic stress-related pattern for some people, where they predict things that they are going to do wrong or that they have done wrong before it has happened. So when we create these patterns, we keep doing them over and over and over again. Like another pattern could be that you felt very trusting in your childhood, and so you'll continue to trust people and maybe not be careful enough, and then maybe get taken advantage of. So an analogy of how our patterns in our mind are is a bit like if you imagine a mountain, and if you look at a mountain, there's always these worn paths in the mountain where people always climb up. So if you look at a mountain, you see the way everybody goes up the same pattern all the time. It's a little bit like that in our minds. We have a go-to reaction. We have a go-to way of dealing with things. So we will automatically do that well-worn path. And if stress or anxiety is a well-worn path in your mind, or of just your nature, the way that you do things, then to change it is going to be a little bit more difficult. And to start with, you need to see that you have this pattern there in the first place. So first of all, you see the patterns there, and then you try and create a new one. You try and do things a little bit differently. You get very curious about how you are, and you start to throw in little changes. So it's a little bit like if you see a well-worn pattern up a mountain, and then you start going a slightly different route. You climb over a few rocks or through a few brambles, and it will be harder to go on the route that is not well-worn. It's easier to go on the well-worn path. But this is the path to help us change those patterns, and it takes kind of awareness. So we need to slow down. We need to be very curious about ourselves. We need to really watch our behaviors. And I suppose mindfulness really helps with this, and breathing techniques to change those well-worn patterns. So we need to try and make stress almost like a friend. We need to learn how to manage it. We need to learn how to work with it. Stress is really important. I mean, a certain amount of stress gets us up in the morning. A certain amount of adrenaline gets us going, gets us excited about things in life. Stress is not bad. Stress is necessary to a point. Like a certain amount of adrenaline is important to get us moving, get us going, get us excited. And then there's when it's gone too far, or when we've let it last too long. I mean, we also need this adrenaline to help us get away from dangerous situations. We need to be able to protect ourselves. So understanding how stress is for you is really important, and maybe taking some time to write down how stress patterns tend to play out in your life. What tends to be the thing that triggers it, that gets you into that place where you start acting in the ways that you generate more and more stress. There was some interesting research done in Harvard on professionals and their levels of stress. And they discovered over a 10-year span of research that professionals had between 30 to 100 projects on their plates at any one time, which is a lot of projects. They discovered that workers were interrupted about 7 times an hour, and altogether they were distracted for 2.1 hours in the day, which, if you think about it, is an awful lot of distraction. And when you think about the devices and the emails and the social media and all the different things that can distract you in a day, when you're trying to get a project done, that's quite a big pile of interruption. The research also indicated that 40% of adults will lie awake at night as a result of a stressful day's work. 1 in 5 people have a stress problem across the globe. There's also a big stigma with stress, and while it's a growing epidemic, people are inclined to pretend that they're okay, that their lives are not impacted when actually they really are. Interestingly, it also indicated that women were more likely to get stressed, twice as much as men, However, men are more likely to drink and maybe more better at hiding their stress. And men are 3 times more likely to have a drink problem than women. So I'm not sure that stress is more hidden I'm not sure that there's more of a stress problem for men or women if it evens out. There are 4 parts to look at when you look at stress. So one is what you feel. What emotions do you feel when you are stressed? So for many people, there's a certain level of fear there. Fear, scared, worried, concerned. For some, there can be a level of anger, pushing through, needing to fight, needing to address things, needing to get things done. So there's something about you figuring out exactly what it is that you feel and how it manifests itself for you, how it starts off and what happens as it snowballs. The next thing to look at in stress is what you think. So we will all have our own thought patterns, thought processes that happen when we're under stress. It could be, oh, I'll never get this done, this isn't good enough, something will go wrong, there could be any kind of different sort of stress thought. And that might hold you back or it might propel you forward. Some people might think, okay, I need to really work hard to get this done, or I need to contact as many people as possible or get as much support. So everyone will have their own way of thinking or their own go-to sort of pattern. So it's also worth figuring out what exactly are the thought processes that happen for you when you start to feel stressed. What is your go-to reaction? The next one then is, what is it that you do when you're stressed? How do you act when you're stressed? Do you put your head under the duvet and think, I can't do it, it's never going to happen? And wait till last minute and then cram it all at the end? Or do you go, okay, big task ahead, make a list, get working, look at the hardest things first? So you will have your own way of acting, your own ways of behaving. So again, maybe writing that down as well. So writing down what it is that you tend to feel, the general pattern of your thought processes, and what's your action. What is it that you tend to do? Finally, you could look at how your body reacts. So what kind of physical symptoms do you get when you're stressed? Some people find that they clench their neck and shoulders. That's a really common one. Some people's backs get sore. Some people clench their eyebrows. Some people's many people find their heart rate increases. Breathing will usually change. So knowing what way your breathing changes when you're stressed is important, because then you can learn to breathe differently, which might bring you back into a more relaxed state. So noticing how your breath is, any muscles that clench in your body, how your heart is, what your face muscles do, your neck and shoulders. So notice the physical reaction and maybe write that down as well, because when you know that, then you can work on changing that. You can start to see a situation come, this is going to stress me, and then stop going into the pattern of what you normally feel, think, do, and how your body normally reacts. I'd like to talk about a couple of myths and facts in relation to stress. So one myth is that stress is a mental illness. And while stress, when it's reached a high level for a long period of time, can certainly feel like you're having a mental illness, and for some people it feels like you can be having a mental breakdown, it's not actually a mental illness. It's not a disease that you can pick up from other people. It is something that is natural to us to a point, but like many things, if it gets pushed too far, that it can have a very detrimental and long-term difficult effect on us. Another myth is that stress will lead to a mental illness. And I think there can be quite a big fear around that. If I'm stressed for too long, I may get a mental illness. So while stress, again, can make you feel like you're losing control or can tie in with other things and people can end up with mental illnesses, it is not guaranteed that stress will lead you to a mental illness. That is not a clear path. There has to be a lot more goes on for you to end up with a mental illness than just being stressed for a good while. So it is not, I think people are afraid to admit that they're stressed because they're afraid of mental illness coming down the line. And that stops them from then addressing and dealing with their stress. So in general, it is not guaranteed to lead you to a mental illness. Another myth is that you need to take tablets to control stress. So some people, I think, might be quite scared of taking medication. Some other people might be very quick to turn to medication and not look at the other sides of stress. Whether you take medication or not, I think you still need to learn how stress is for you and how to manage that stress and how to grow and develop in an understanding of how your mind, body, emotions deal with stress. We all need to learn those things. I think if you're in a very difficult place and you're not clear enough to be able to take on techniques, that it can be very helpful to talk to a doctor and to take medication, even if it's very briefly. Equally, many people don't take medication, they just do techniques and work from there. Or some people focus more on medication but a little bit on techniques. So there's no necessarily right way of doing these things. But whatever it is you're doing when it comes to medication, it's very important to work with your doctor on that and to make sure that you're doing everything with a very professional, supportive background. Another myth is that stress only affects weak people. So stress is a part of how we are. Stress is a little bit a part of our nature, a part of how we deal with things. I think that in many ways it is harder to look at our vulnerabilities, our insecurities, our darker emotions, our more difficult emotions. I think it takes a lot of courage to admit that we're stressed, to admit that we're angry, to admit that we're scared. I think that you're a stronger person if you look at and deal with and work with your stresses and anxieties and fears. And I think that people who push those things down, well, when you push an emotion down, it usually stays there and it will come up in some kind of distorted way later on. The more you push down, the more it gets repressed and the more distorted it can come out. If you bottle up a load of anger or bottle up a lot of fear, it will come out in a strange way again. So an example would be if I was having a fight with my family in the morning in the house and they were giving out to me and I wasn't strong enough for standing up for myself, and then I was harbouring anger towards them, but I didn't really address it with them. So I go and I get in my car and I start driving down the road and I get really angry with the other cars on the road. I'm not actually angry with the other cars in the road. I have repressed anger from an issue that I didn't deal with very well earlier on. So the more we push down, the more we bottle up, the more and deeper and darker the difficult emotions are, the more I think of it as twisted because it comes out in ways that doesn't make sense. Like getting angry with the traffic is not why I was angry. I was angry with the people in my house that morning. So it's distorted. It's not what it seems. And that's really important to be aware of. Either way, my point being that it is a myth that stress only affects weak people. It affects us all. And I think we're stronger if we address it and look at it and deal with it. Another myth is that you can be born with stress and that it's genetic. And while it might feel like you have had a lot of stress from early on in your life, that maybe your life or your childhood was stressful and that you've always felt stressed, the reality is that it's not a genetic thing, that you don't have a gene for anxiety. or a gene for stress. We all get a little bit stressed at times, and the more stressful our environment or our situation, the more stress we will feel. Knowing that it's not genetic gives us a space to think that there is more chance for us to grow and change how we are reacting to things. And while it's very difficult to change, like I talked about the mountain path, it's so ingrained in us, this pathway, this way of doing things. So changing is difficult, but we can do it, and people do change. People do change. So what will happen when we're stressed, or what's the general sense of what happens to us? And it's different for everybody. So I'm going to give a list of different things that happen to people when they're stressed, and some of them you will think, yes, that's me, and some of them you'll think, no, that's not me. So it might be worth writing down the things that resonate for you as things that happen when you're stressed, and the things that don't resonate for you, you can just ignore. So one thing is that self-confidence will drop. So generally stress ties in with not feeling like you can reach the end or achieve the aim, or that it's not a very attainable goal, that it's too much. Stress tends to link in with feeling like too much, and that will of course decrease our confidence, decrease our self-esteem, because we're not sure if we can make it. Another thing is that we might feel threatened. So that sense of adrenaline, that sense of fight or flight, sometimes if we've been stressed a lot for a while, we might start to just feel a general sense of something too much is going to happen, and we start getting sort of fearful or prepared for difficulties to arise, for threats in life. So we might have this sense in general of just feeling a bit threatened, that we're just not sure what's going to come from where next. We might experience doubt, so we might second guess our opinions, our judgments. We might need to ask others to make sure we're on the right track. We might not just really feel, yes, I know what I'm doing and I know where I'm going. The mind might race, we might think a lot, maybe think about several different things, not sure which one is right. Again, with the second guessing yourself, you might be uncertain of what to do, so coming up with lots of different possibilities and then getting more confused as you go along. Some people will avoid the fact that they're stressing altogether and get involved in some kind of TV series and watch all of it, or clean their entire house from top to bottom, or contact people that they haven't seen in a long time. So some people will just distract themselves completely from the stress. Some people feel trapped, like there's no way out. I'm stuck in this situation. How do I move? How do I get out of it? And when you're in that trapped feeling, and when you feel like the walls are caving in around you, it's really important to get some advice and support from others and try and think outside the box. Try and get help thinking up other scenarios, other ideas, other ways around things, because the trapped feeling can be very repressive, can be too much. We might feel that the worst is coming out in us. So often when we are in a very high level of stress or anxiety, it can feel like this is some of the worst parts of my personality, that we're weaker, we're less confident, we're unsure, we're not holding our own. It can just feel like, what is this me? Who is this me? Where is the confident, capable me? We also might feel a lack of control. We might not feel like we can run this or do this or make this happen. And again, getting support and help from others is really important. So if you want a bit more information on this, you can look at the next video, which is techniques on reducing stress.